Force Base, or
Maxwell
Air Force Base at Montgomery. Stayed there a short period of time and got a transfer from Montgomery to Dobbins Air Force Base. And that's where I hit the jackpot. Because I found Mary there, found my wife there, and we got married in February the 17th, 1961. She was an Indiana girl, but she's a Georgia girl now and has been since 1961. And after Dobbins, but when I went to Dobbins, that was the only base I'd ever been stationed at that I really wanted to stay, wanted to stay for a while. And about 18 months later, we had moved the whole outfit out to Oklahoma City. So we stayed out there, bought a house, had a dog before we had a house, and wasn't out there too long, about a year I guess. We left there and got an assignment to go to Brazil, but we had to go to language school before we could go to Brazil, so we went to Washington, D.C. to the Foreign Service Institute and took 6 months of Portuguese language training. Went to Brazil and stayed 2 years. Came back from there and went out to Washington State. And a year to the day from the time we left Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, coming back to the States, 1 year later to the day, we was back in Rio de Janeiro. That included our 30 days vacation when we got back from Brazil and 30 days before we went back to Brazil. Anyway, we went back to Brazil the second time, went to a different location. The first time we were up in the northeast part of Brazil, and then the second time it was still considered the northeast, but it was more in the central part of Brazil. Did 2 years there. Came back to the States and was stationed at Robbins Air Force Base, and stayed here longer than I've ever stayed at any assignment I had in my entire Air Force career. Stayed here a little bit over 3 years, and went to Southeast Asia, to Thailand, and in the meantime, though, when we were stationed here, our first daughter came along, and that was the 4th of December, 1969, and that was another jackpot that we hit 3 so far. And after Southeast Asia, I came back to Moody Air Force Base, and that's where I ended my career. And the reason I ended my career is I hadn't been back, but just hadn't got back really from overseas. Been back about a year, and they gave me another assignment to go right back to Southeast Asia, and I already had word that the outfit that I was going to was closing down, so I wasn't overly interested in going. Plus, Anna was just 17 months old when I went over the first time. Then when we got back to Moody, that's where the third jackpot come in, and Josh was born. John Joshua Ray, born the 8th day of June, 1973. And I retired out of Moody and fully intended to go to LJ and build a house, and it was right when that heavy energy crisis hit in '74, and nobody wanted to give you a bid on building the house except on cost plus. And Mary always liked Warner Robins, and I never disliked it, but I'd always wanted to go back to LJ to retire, and fully intended to, and that was our intent when we moved to Warner Robins. I was going to stay here about long enough to go up there and get a house built, but then when I couldn't get any firm figures, we ended up buying a place here, and it's probably the best thing that we ever did. But I still got that strong desire to go back to LJ, but I don't believe I'll ever make it. Now, that's all I can think of.
And then after you retired from the Air Force, you worked civil service for a good many years, too.
No, I didn't work civil service.
You was a private contractor?
I worked for a government contractor for 15 years. There was about 3 or 4 different, it was the same job and the same contract, but different companies had the contract, and I believe I worked for about 3 companies in that time frame, maybe 4. But then when I ended up retiring, totally retiring in 1st September 1990.
Okay. Let me let you take a break, and I'll ask Mother the same question pretty much.
Wait a while.
And you don't have to remember all that, but just, you married John Waldon Davis. What year? You remember when that was?
1940.
March the 1st, 1940.
1940, wasn't it?
2.
Huh?
41 then. No? Yeah, 41. March 1st, 41.
Where'd y'all first live when you got married?
Auburn, Alabama.
And he was in the Army?
No, he was in school.
Okay.
But not at Auburn, but a school getting him ready for service, I guess. And then we went to Atlanta, Georgia Tech, and then New Jersey, I believe. New York or New Jersey. That was 3 schools anyway, getting him ready to go in service. Radar training is what he's doing. It's been a long time, I can't remember. You did good.
And some of the places y'all lived, you lived in Japan?
Moved 31 times, so I can't remember all of them.
So Japan and France, and Fort Benning and Fort Stewart.
Fort Belvoir. The longest, though, was overseas. It was Japan. Well, it was 18 months. We thought we'd be there 3 years, but the Korean War started, and I came home. I elected to stay, but they sent me home. And then France was 3 years. We had 3 Easters and 3 everything in France.
That's where Alice was born.
She was born in Verdun, France,
Yeah.
40 miles from where we lived. We lived in Bury, Sir Salt's Far Barley Duke.
Say that again.
I think Joe was 3 or 4 months when we went over, and he was 3 or 4 months when we came back.
3 or 4 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Stayed there over 3 years, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you gave birth to 6 kids, right?
That's right.
Um,
Mimi and Ray was LJ.
okay, they were born in LJ?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And then,
You were Fort Benning,
uh-huh.
Chattahoochee County, and Alice, France. Janice, Tampa, and Jay, Lake City.
And he's actually born in Valdosta.
Yeah.
Lived in
He was
Lake
born
City.
in Georgia, but we lived in Lake City.
Okay. And your first husband, John, died in 1957,
Yes.
and from
Encephalitis.
encephalitis while stationed at Fort Stewart.
Yes.
Okay. And so after that, you moved back to Atlanta,
Yes.
and then remarried again about 1964.
Yes.
Okay, and then moved to Tampa. Married John Loudon, moved to Tampa. Okay, and then ended up moving to Lake City, and then back to Warner, and to Warner Robins. Okay, and then your next husband was Woodrow Sullivan. Your last husband, right? Your third husband, Woodrow Sullivan.
Yes.
Okay, what year did you marry him? You remember?
I should.
And he passed away, but how many years were you married? Do you remember? About 10 or 15?
About 15 or 16.
Yeah. Okay, and he's retired from the Navy and retired from civil service.
And retired minister.
Retired minister.
3 times.
Yeah. Okay, and he had 2 kids,
Yes.
Mary and Mike.
Mike.
And Michael died of a heart attack when he's in his 40s. Okay. And you retired from working at Robins Air Force Base. What did you do out there?
I assigned the military families that were coming in PCS, assigned them quarters, and then terminated them when they left. That was part of the time. Part of the time it was the in and out. What do you call that? The
Transit.
yeah, the transit.
Visiting officer?
Yeah.
Visiting officer quarters?
Visiting officers' quarters and temporary lodging quarters were then listed too.
Yeah. Okay. Going back to both of you, whoever wants to answer this question, tell me what it was like growing up in Ellijay.
Not a better place in the world to grow up in Ellijay, as far as I'm concerned. And a lot of changes there since we were growing up. But to me, that maybe at the time I didn't think of it so much that way. But I always had itchy feet, and I wanted to travel, and I wanted to get going as soon as I could. But Ellijay was a good place, good small town place to grow up, without a doubt.
I always said I wanted to travel. Mother said I could be a missionary. I get to travel.
Yeah. Tell me what you do on a typical summer day and when you're 10, 12 years old.
Well, right across from where we live is a river, the Ellijay River. We'd go down there and catch tadpoles.
Yeah.
And we'd play tennis and had to go swimming in the rivers around there. Had several different swimming holes that we'd go to.
Cherry Hole, then over at the East LJ where it's dammed up.
East Town Dam and Cherry Hole and the Oil House and
yeah.
all those.
Daddy would go with us too.
Yeah, and I remember one time before Daddy died, on a Sunday afternoon, there was an old covered bridge down below Ellijay, and he took us down there, and I think you were with us, but anyway, to get down to the river, we had to go down a tree, and we had a terrible time, or Daddy had a terrible time getting us down there, but we finally got down, and I don't remember how we got back up, I guess. But that's something that's always stood out in my mind, remembering that we went down there and went swimming, but we'd always try to find a good swimming hole close to a watermelon patch. And there's a fellow by the name of Sam Parks that put out watermelons up there, and I don't know why in the world the man put a watermelon patch by the swimming hole, but he did, and we took full advantage of it. Full advantage. There's another fellow by the name of Smith, Erskine Smith, and he drove an oil truck that belonged to, the oil company belonged to the Dover family. He drove an oil truck for him, and the oil house was right there by the side of the river, and he kept a boat there all the time. And that poor guy had a terrible time keeping that boat. We'd get the boat,
Believe he remembers.
and we would never go upstream because you had to paddle or row go upstream, and we'd just go till we got tired, and then we'd pull it off, and he'd have to go walk those banks till he found that boat. But that was, and just whatever kids do, I guess. Mostly fishing and catching tadpoles and swimming. And one summer, I would guess the summer that I was probably 13, a couple of houses up from us, Mr. Hudson had a tennis court in the back, and we played an awful lot of tennis over there. That one summer is the only real time that I remember. I don't know if he put it off limits to us actually.
Well, Margaret was a year older than me.
Yeah.
And but she's a good friend, you know.
He built it for her, for Margaret, and let us play there.
Did you ever walk up to the stores in town? Because the house was only a block or so from the square.
Well, it used to be,
Hips.
yeah, Mr. Ben Hips had a store there, and he sold everything from hats to bucket candy.
We could get